Today in the show, I chat with my friend Robert about a recent Disney experience we had together. This past weekend, Robert and I went on the Walt's Main Street Story tour in Disneyland Park. Here's how the Disneyland website describes the tour. On this intimate walking tour, discover hidden details, little-known facts, and endearing trivia about Disneyland Park's magnificent Main Street U.S.A. Listen as your dedicated tour guide regales you with behind-the-scenes stories and enchanting tidbits throughout this 90-minute experience. Plus, learn about special links to Walt Disney's boyhood town of Marceline, Missouri. It all culminates with a visit to Walt's apartment high above the Disneyland Fire Station in Town Square, where guests will have the chance to enjoy refreshments on the patio for the first time ever. Listen as Robert and I share our honest thoughts about the tour. Was it worth the cost? Did we learn a lot? Was it an unforgettable Disney experience? We'll answer those questions and so much more right now.
Put on your comfy shoes and join along for a Disney tour.
Hello and welcome to the show, Robert, longtime listener and patron of Disney Coast to Coast, but first-time guest co-host. So hello.
Yeah, thanks for having me here today, Jeff.
I'm super excited to chat with you because you actually suggested that we check out the Walt's Main Street Story tour at Disneyland Park. Now, before we jump into that, I'm curious, had you ever experienced or done one of these guided tours in a Disney park before?
No, I don't think I have. Not a guided tour. Like I've gone on the in Disney World, the railroad train tour. It wasn't really a tour. You just they kind of took you to that one of the stations, and actually the trains weren't even running at the time, and they gave you a little bit of history. But I've never actually went on a physical walking tour. Throughout the park.
I would count that though. That's a behind the scenes tour. I would count that one. I'd done a bunch of them in Walt Disney World. I actually think I'd done more in Walt Disney World than I have at Disneyland, but one that I specifically remember at Disneyland doing is the Walk in Walt's Disneyland Footsteps tour, which is currently not available. I kind of feel like this is similar, but kind of on a lesser scale, the one that we did. But with a Walk in Walt's Footsteps, I think, I could be getting this wrong, but I think at one point during that tour, you did go to Walt's apartment. But when I took it, it was under construction. So we actually went to the Dream Suite, which is now 21 Royal, which is now owned and operated by Club 33. So it's a space that most people will never get to see. It's that crazy, $15,000 dinner or something like that. So it was kind of cool to do that. But I do remember taking that tour and being like, oh, I would like to go to Walt's apartment above the firehouse. And that wasn't available at the time. So when you suggested this, I was like, heck yeah, this is totally up my alley. And we're lucky enough to have gone to the park so much that there's not a ton that we've never done before. And this was a great opportunity. So thanks for thinking of me.
Yeah, and I know you mentioned you went on a different tour that had some similarities, and I actually did a little research about that. I was kind of curious, how did the old tour compare to the new tour? And there were quite a few differences I saw throughout the tour, and maybe we could even talk about that a little later in this episode here.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. Now, I'm curious, why were you interested in this one? Was it for the same reason as me?
I'm a big history buff, just all things Walt Disney. How the park was created, and how did Walt spend his time in the park, and also it's really just interesting to see things that a lot of people don't ever see. I've ever since I was a little child, I used to always look up above the firehouse, and I'm like, oh, what's up there? Oh, I see a lamp. Once I learned more about it, it was like, oh, I'd really like to see that part of history, and see how Walt used to spend his nights in the parks.
And that is one of the cool things about any of the tours that are available at Disneyland is it is the only park that Walt saw completed. And that's a big deal. I know that, we all associate Walt Disney with Walt Disney World, as we should, but he never came close to seeing it completed. So there's something just special about Disneyland in that way. And I think that these tours really make note of that. And I think that that's great that they keep that history alive in that way.
seeing how Walt spent the time in the park and getting a little view into like, he seemed like to be a really humble person. This apartment is a very small apartment. Once we went up there, it's like 500 square feet, and it has like a Victorian style to it. But even just what he had for dinner up there, like he was a very simple person. He had his own routines, and what I based on the tour, I also heard that he used it for entertaining family, his children and nieces and so on. So it was it was a just like a family get together place as well. So that was like really fascinating to me.
Yeah. Now, this tour is one of really the only tours available right now. They did have some of the holiday tours and such, but all of the tours went away, of course, when the parks closed due to the pandemic. And they've only been back for about 5 months now. So it does feel like, to me at least, that they're slowly ramping things back up in the guided tour department. I think there will be more coming along. I know there's a lot of hiring going on right now and training of more tour guides. So I'm happy to see that they're back. And hopefully stuff like, Walk and Walt's Disneyland Footsteps will come back as well, those longer tours that offer more. Just some kind of factoids about this. This is a 90-minute tour, so not super long. And it does cost $160. That is, of course, on top of the theme park admission and your reservation as well. So that's something to keep in mind. Now, before we start getting into details of the tour, after we took the tour, you actually told me about a prediction that you had.
Yeah, yes,
Now,
I did.
without revealing whether or not your prediction came true, why don't you tell the folks what that prediction was?
Obviously, Jeff, you know a lot about Disney history, and I know you are also a stickler about quotes. And my prediction was like, if there's anything that would be questioned on the tour, it might be a misquote. And so I basically said that the tour guide will say a quote, misquote it, and Jeff will correct that tour guide. So that was my prediction before we went to that tour.
How dare you, sir? Do I seem like that sort of person? Oh my goodness. Listen, that's a fair prediction. And we will reveal later on whether or not that prediction came true. But, we must say that this was a small group of us. It was me, you, another couple, and your little boy, Ollie, who technically was not on the tour because he was under the age of 3, but he was there. But so it was 4 adults and 1 child, which is pretty small. These can get up to about 12 people, sometimes more. It sounded like if somebody moves things around a little bit. So I mean, I definitely prefer a smaller group. It was very nice and intimate, I would say, and allows you more time to ask questions and stuff like that. But we were lucky. It was probably a third of the size of what it should have been.
Yeah, I was hoping the tour would be on the smaller side, knowing that there's not that much space up there. And then it gives us more time to interact with the tour guide, ask more questions. And yeah, pleasantly surprised that it was such a small tour that day.
One of the first things that we get handed is a bit of technology to help us hear the tour better. And this is an earpiece that we can put in because listen, like we're never, especially in the small group that we were in, we were never terribly far from the guide, but I appreciate that this is an option that they have because I can definitely see it with a group of 12 being in a busy, loud park that it might be difficult hearing, and these people certainly don't want to strain their voices. They're giving multiple tours a day. But you had some funny insight on the the headgear that they gave us.
Yeah, I mean, when they first handed it to us, I'm like, "What is this?" And then I looked at it, I'm like, "This looks like '80s tech. Like it's just very ancient and rather large." Obviously, with technology gets newer and newer, it gets shrink down. And I mean, this thing was probably 10 times, 15 times the size of an AirPod, and I didn't think it was all that comfortable. I think it's time for Disney to maybe do a tech refresh there. And I don't think it even worked very well. For us being so close to the tour guide, I ended up just turning mine off, and I think your battery actually died, perhaps. shortly after it was given to you, and it was cutting in and out constantly. Us being only 10 feet away from the tour guide.
Yeah, it was funny because I didn't even think twice about it because I'd taken these tours before. I was like familiar with them. But when you're like, you literally said to me, this is like 80s tech. I was like, you're right. And it's, you'd think it would be wireless, but I honestly think the reason it's not wireless is because their Wi-Fi is just so bad in the parks. And if they were going to go that route, I actually think they would have to have a separate Wi-Fi for tours specifically. And, that's a big investment, right? But yeah, you made me laugh when you're like, what is this? This is crazy. And mine did indeed die about, 10 or 15 minutes into the tour. Like you said, we didn't need it, so it wasn't a problem. But it's still kind of funny nonetheless.
Yeah, I mean, I totally understand why they have it. And, we took a 9 a.m. tour, the earliest tour, so the parks weren't terribly busy at the time. I could totally see it being a lot busier and then having a larger group that's more spread out and needing it. It really kind of took me out of the tour, like hearing the person's voice through her mouth and then hearing it through my ear, through the audio device. And it kept pulling me out of the tour and I felt less engaged. So, since we didn't need it, I'm glad we didn't have to use it.
Plus, it was only like in one ear. They only give you one earpiece, which also, that's always just kind of weird. Because like you said, you're hearing the real world plus the tech. And in any case, it was funny. Now, the tour does start in the park. We kind of hit 5 main spots on Main Street USA. One of them is Town Square. Then we move over to the Main Street Cinema, followed by the Flower Market, Coke Corner, and in front of the Emporium. Am I missing anything, or those were like the 5 big stops, right?
I think that was it. Yeah, I think you hit them all.
Okay. So during like this portion of the tour, was there anything that you learned about the history of Main Street that particularly piqued your interest?
I think I knew most of it already.
You're a fun facts guy. That's like something that should be noted. Like you really enjoy listening to podcasts, watching YouTube videos, and like, knowing you're like a statistics guy, even like more so than me. I'm more of a what do they say, forest versus tree sort of guy, and I feel like you're kind of a tree guy.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure, really, to be honest with you. I've gone down the YouTube rabbit hole. So I've come across a lot of these things, and I've been going to the park, for over 40 years now. So I've run into these things over the years, or I've sought out these things like, there's the light bulb that is, colored half red and white. I mean, and then I have to go find it. So like I've been to the park so many times that I've done excursions to kind of look for these things. So yeah, I think I really didn't learn new things per se, but I still enjoyed it.
Yeah, for the most part, in these types of tours, they like to ask, oh, does anybody know the answer to such and such? And like, I'd say 95% of the time I know the answer, but like, I don't want to be that guy. But when like nobody else answers it, you're like, yeah, I know. And, you say what they want to hear. But I will say I totally learned something new during this tour. And that's the thing. I should say going into these tours, I recognize that I have like a stupid amount of Disney knowledge in my brain, like more than any human needs, right? And, you probably as well, and many listeners probably as well. So whenever I take a tour, I don't go in or even read a book about Disney or anything. I don't go into it expecting to learn a ton. I just want little nuggets of stuff that like I'd never heard of, thought about, or anything like that. And I got that with this tour. Do you have any idea what I'm referring to?
I don't actually.
Okay.
I do recall you. I mean, it was a small crowd, a small tour group, and they weren't very vocal, so I knew you were, giving
How
a lot
dare
of the
you?
answers. You were the Jeopardy champion that day, for sure. But yeah, please tell me what was the new nugget of information you learned?
I had no idea that there was like a little Coca-Cola bottle museum in the windows of the Coke corner. I knew about the striped, the light bulb half white, half red, but like in the windows to each side of the main entrance of Coke corner, there's like these window displays that kind of have like a little Coca-Cola bottle museum, and it has Coke bottles from different, time periods and different areas of the world. I've walked by this a million times and have never noticed this. Were you familiar with this?
Yes, but I didn't know that they had like a gold-plated Coca-Cola bottle. I think it was gold-plated, or it was just gold-colored, and that was fascinating to me. And then I quickly like looked on eBay after it. I'm like, what do gold-plated Coca-Cola bottles go for? And I guess they're so saturated around. They're not really that expensive at all. But Coca-Cola is my or Diet Coke. That's like my go-to drink.
Just for the taste of it, Diet Coke.
I think it's completely superior to Pepsi in every way. Sorry, Pepsi lovers out there. I think I need a gold Coca-Cola bottle to put on my desk now. So that might be a new addition to my desk soon.
So you knew about this, though. I'm curious, where did you first hear about this, or had you just noticed it in the past?
I've noticed it, but it's not something that I like examine very closely, and that's probably why I never saw the gold Coke bottle, or maybe it's a newer edition. I don't really know because they do switch them out, or they get new editions. I think they said like they had a new
The
bottle
Japan
from
one, I think.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I have a strange fascination with like pop culture food memorabilia. Like I have a really crazy fascination with like McDonald's marketing of the 80s and like old cereal boxes. I don't know. I just really am into that. And like Coca-Cola is such an interesting company and their marketing through the years and like their creation of kind of like the Santa Claus that we know today. And so I don't know, I kind of loved this Coke Corner mini Coke museum display. And that was probably like one of my favorite takeaways from the tour. So, and that was completely new to me. And it was really awesome. I loved that.
It was cool, and it's also more enjoyable for myself at least to drink Coke out of a glass bottle versus a can. I just don't know why, but I think it tastes better. It's probably all in my head. So yeah, I'm always fascinated by Coke bottles and how they've changed over time.
What about a Batu plastic bottle? Does that taste any different?
Oh yeah, that's just awful. That's horrible.
Do you remember during, I don't know if this happened near you, but actually maybe it didn't. It might have just been down here because we're near Disneyland. But those Coke bottles that they sell for I don't know how much in Batu, $5, $6, $7. They were selling crates of them in like stores here during pandemic because they were all just going to go bad and expire. So you could buy like crates full of these things for like $1 each or whatever, probably less. And it was just really kind of funny. Did this happen near you at all?
No, no, not at all, not at all. And
Okay.
and I imagine they probably don't store well. They're such an odd shape that you
Yeah.
probably can't get that many in a case to start with. But no, I didn't see that. I think I have a couple around here somewhere that I've never actually opened, so I probably won't be drinking them at all ever.
Now, one of the things, of course, that they touch on when talking about Main Street are the Main Street dedication windows. I think all fans know about how it's kind of the credits for the creation of Disneyland Park. And they pointed out a few of those. And there was a good amount of talk about Walt's childhood years in Marceline, Missouri, and how Main Street USA was very much inspired by Main Street in Marceline, Missouri. I believe Walt lived there for 5 years. It was, and he said, he only had great things to say about Marceline and said it shaped him into who he was. But one thing that really surprised me during the tour was that there was absolutely no mention of Harper Goff and his involvement with the creation of Main Street USA. If you don't know, listeners, basically Main Street USA is an amalgamation of Marceline, Missouri's Main Street, where Walt grew up, and Fort Collins, Colorado Main Street, where Harper Goff grew up. And both inspired it heavily, but there was zero mention of that, which I found kind of interesting. I was a bit surprised by that, but it is Walt's Main Street story, so maybe that's the angle they're going, but I found it a little weird that they didn't touch on that at all.
So I thought I saw a YouTube video of you went on the Walk in Walt's Footsteps tour, and I thought I saw one tour guide mention Harper Goff before. I could be wrong.
Quite possibly on that tour. I'm
Yeah.
just saying on the one that we
Yeah.
just took.
Oh yeah, exactly. So like which makes me think also that the looking at Walt's Walking Walt's Footsteps tour, there it seemed to have a very similar script like a lot of the same points they hit upon were in that tour as well, and it seemed almost verbatim actually in parts of it. A lot of that seemed to be lifted from that tour because I actually just watched a YouTube video of the tour that was done about 10 years ago, and there was a lot of similarities with how that dialogue was given.
So that you're touching upon something that I definitely wanted to talk about, and that is that this is very much a scripted tour. Now, obviously, all tours are scripted to a point, right? Like you've got facts, dates, things you're going to mention, but in a very classic traditional Disney way, where they like to really control the narrative. It is heavily scripted, and it takes a really skilled person to be able to take a fully scripted tour and make it feel completely natural and their own. That's something that I think doesn't do the tour justice. I feel like if they were to give the tour guides like, hey, here's the facts, here's the points you need to hit, make it your own, I think that would feel more natural. But I don't know about you. Did you feel like it went into a scripted kind of patter?
Yeah, I did, and I know what you're trying to get through. It's not as personal. It's not as organic or fluid. It's more robotic. I think our tour guide did a good job,
Definitely.
but I wish it was. I wish it felt a little less scripted, or maybe if the tour guides, or I don't know what the rules are, but maybe if they're allowed to deviate from the script a bit, or like, do they have to say this paragraph just like they were told to say it, or can they actually deviate from that?
I don't know the 100% answer to that question, but I have a feeling that they really want them sticking to the script. Just knowing the way that Disney works, and even, having attended media sort of things where you interview people, like there's very much the script that they go by, and it's a controlled script. It's the message that Disney wants to come across. To me, I'm all about organic interactions with people. And actually, this is kind of funny, a little bit of a tangent, but I have a conversation with a friend a lot about Disney cast members versus Universal team members and kind of the difference in the way that they interact with each other. And he always defends cast members, and he kind of thinks I'm crazy when I defend team members. And like, I always understood where he was coming from, right? Like, a Disney cast member is often more polished, more friendly. They have that Disney magic sort of thing. But there was something about a Universal team member that I just found really refreshing. And even when they weren't like in the best of moods, or maybe not the most professional or as professional as they should be. And I finally figured out what it is. And for me, it's about being genuine, being real. I would rather somebody who is being genuine in a moment, who might be a little less than professional, than somebody who is clearly faking professional. And I think that that's like the really tough place where you can land when stuff is super scripted or things need to be done exactly a certain way. I think that it just makes people self-conscious, the people who have to perform that role self-conscious and unnatural. And for me, I just want real, organic, natural interactions. And I don't know, maybe most people don't see it. I don't think it's a special skill I have or anything, but I can see it coming from a mile away.
Yeah, I mean, I've experienced some Disney cast members that are less scripted, but yeah, they're few and far between. So I totally understand where you're coming from there. It's also like you said, it might be a personal taste of like what people expect when they go into the different parks as well.
Yeah. Alrighty, so, there was obviously a chunk of this took place on Main Street because it's called Walt's Main Street Story, but I gotta be honest, way more of this took place backstage and in Walt's apartment than I expected. Like, a lot more. So after we did all those little stops on Main Street USA, we headed backstage. So basically, it's the backstage entrance immediately to the right of the firehouse. And then when you go back there, there's pretty much a staircase immediately to the left. And that brings you up to Walt's apartment. I would like to note that at this point, absolutely no cameras. You got to put them away. Obviously, we're going backstage. But also that a few years ago, they added in an elevator so that it is handicap accessible. And this surprised me, not because I'm surprised that Disney took the initiative, but I was just surprised that there was a way to do it. As you said, it's a small apartment. It feels like one of those places that, unfortunately just wouldn't be able to be handicap accessible, but they figured out a way. I think that that's fantastic. None of us in our group needed it, but I think it's wonderful that that is an option for people who need that.
Yeah, I think one of the ways that they were able to do that is that the original stairs were falling apart. They were no longer safe. I actually saw photos of those stairs, and I was like, "Are we going to go up those?" Never seeing the back lot there before, and so they built the stairs, and then they also built a ramp, on the other side of the stairs where they actually put the elevator. So it's Disney, right? They'll figure out a way of how to do things, no matter what.
Yeah, it was a really nice surprise, and I'm really glad that that is an option. So, as I mentioned, at this point, we're going into Walt's apartment, and this is, I would say, the highlight of the tour, right? This is a place that, yeah, it's available, but it's not easily accessible. In fact, it's so inaccessible that our tour guide didn't have the key to it. It is supposed to be unlocked in advance, but I guess it had been forgotten and she had to call someone. But I found it interesting that they don't even give the tour guides the keys to unlock this space. I don't know what they think is going to happen, but that was kind of funny to me.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very select group of people that I guess have access to that key. I imagine it's maybe only a few people a day who have access to that key. But yeah, or do they think they're going to have a wild party in there?
Or maybe they're afraid a guest in the park will tackle them for it or something. I don't know. But in any case, we got inside. The door was unlocked for us. We got inside. Now, I got to say, it is small, but it was actually felt larger than I expected. Looking at it from the outside, I think it looks smaller than it does inside. What do you think?
Yeah, it felt very welcoming. Doing a quick eyeball of it, it does look like it's about 500 square feet. And then, it actually has a much larger bathroom than I was expecting. I thought it was going to have a bathroom the size of a closet, but there's actually a shower in there and a sink and a toilet. It's rather large for such a small apartment. But I think the way that they have it designed and having it's one big studio really, and then the chairs that are there are they're like sofa beds. So that really opens up a lot of space, but they definitely designed it in a way where you didn't feel claustrophobic, and it was very welcoming.
Yeah, as you mentioned earlier, it is a Victorian era decor. And one of the things that's kind of interesting is that when you walk in, on the left side is Walt's kind of sofa bed. And then on the right side is Lillian's sofa bed. And I find that really comical that they didn't just have a big bed. I feel like we're watching I Love Lucy or something.
Well, it was that period of time. I mean, if you actually
but this is real life. This wasn't a TV show.
No, but my understanding was even in real life, this is how people lived.
Walt and Lillian were living real life that way. I don't know. I don't know if they thought they were going to shoot an episode of the Disneyland TV show up there or something, but there was no lovemaking up in Walt's apartment.
I'm going to do a little research. My understanding was this is how certain families slept, and but I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, if that's true, if that's how people slept in real life, people must have been very upset, and I'm glad I don't live back in those days. But in any case, so there's that. Now, one of the cool things was that we were able to wander around. This wasn't stand in this, because, okay, one of the things that we should say is that, and they are pretty forward and upfront about this, a lot of what's in there is replica or replacement stuff. So the carpet has been replaced. I guess there was a flood in there at one point and they had to replace the carpet. So it's not like there's this little patch of carpet you can stand on and you can't move from that because it's the original carpet and they need to preserve it. You're very able to walk around. Now, I will say, if there were 12 guests in there plus the tour guide, it would be pretty cramped. But given it was the four of us, like she was talking, she was doing her script, and we were wandering and looking around. And I thought that that was lovely. There were some really nice surprises with this tour.
I was expecting areas to be roped off because if you look at the older tour, it was roped off. You couldn't walk. You couldn't get near the lamp. You couldn't get near the window. There was like a brass railing there, at least in the videos that I saw online.
This might have been before they put in replica stuff. It might have been original, and that might have been
Maybe,
why.
but I always wanted to like walk up to the lamp, which is not the original lamp, and actually I have a question about that. There's been so many versions of that lamp up there. It's not even a green lamp anymore, which is interesting. But I always wanted to like look through that window, and finally being able to do that. That was the highlight of the tour for me, was to walk over to that window and look through that window and look down Main Street.
I'm so happy to hear you say that because I would agree. It was the same thing for me because we've all heard the stories about Walt sitting up there looking out that window, watching the guests walk through his park and just like be delighted by that. And that's exactly what I did. And that was what I wanted to do. And we actually haven't talked about this. I didn't realize that. I didn't even see you do that. I thought I was being a nerd doing it myself. Yeah, that was the moment that like I looked forward to, and it was really kind of fun to see people walking into the park. Like you said, it was early; it was a 9 a.m. tour, so these were people showing up for the day to start their Disneyland day. They weren't tired yet, they weren't exhausted, they weren't fighting yet. It was just like that complete joy of we're here, we did it, we got to Disneyland.
You know what I thought about? Like, if I ever did the tour again, I would definitely have someone that's not on the tour in front of the firehouse and taking a photo of me looking through that window. Like, I would love to have that memory. So I would do that next time.
You know what? They should do that. One of the things we should mention is that I did say we had to put our cameras away, but one of the perks of this is a Disney Photo Pass photographer comes up and takes your photo in the apartment and you get a free downloads of the photos. How cool would that be if they started at like down there, hey, look through the window, get the photo taken, and then come up? Of course, added work, added time, so I get why they don't, but that would be pretty darn cool.
Yeah, that would be amazing. That would be the icing on the top of the cake, right?
Yeah. Were there any certain objects or artifacts in there that you found really interesting?
I am, fascinated with music devices, and also I'm really into original style photography. So the film photography, and there were some original photos up there. So I was geeking out over seeing some of the original black and white original print photos of Walt and Lillian, and in different areas of the park. That was really cool.
Yeah, there was the music box up there as well as the gramophone. I think one of my favorite photos was one of Walt practicing his opening day speech. And I'd seen this photo before, but the tour guide noted something that I had never really thought of and noticed before, and that is that in that photo he wasn't wearing his tie, and so it wasn't him on opening day, it was him practicing that opening day speech. I was like, oh, that's really cool. And as you said, there were just a lot of photos of him in the park, enjoying the park. Now, a lot of the stuff that was in there, it's owned by the Walt Disney family, and Lillian Disney's family requested to have it, or most of it, back. So most everything in there is a replica, which, is disappointing, but also understandable. I get it, but I feel like if it were all original, it would be more restricted, right? And I just think it's something that happens as time passes, right? It's, we probably wouldn't even be allowed up there if it were all original. So it's kind of, the compromise.
Yeah, I believe there was also some water damage up there as well. I mean, they
There
called it a
was.
flood, and I don't know what they mean by flood. Like, did a pipe burst and it flooded the area? And then it does have, this very, when you walk into an older building, been around for 50, 100 years, it does have that older smell, that architectural smell to it, even though that they did replace a lot of things, it sounded like.
Yeah, you mentioned the bathroom earlier, and we got to go into the closet in the bathroom. I want you to share with the listeners the brilliant idea that you had.
Oh, geez. Well, I guess they're selling the Splash Mountain water on eBay for a lot of money, and I think that's just hilarious. I would never buy that, but I'm thinking, well, the toilet water in Walt's apartment must be worth a lot of money, so they wouldn't let us in there. But joking aside, I would never do such a thing. But I just could imagine some crazy fan going in there and trying to sell like Walt's toilet water, which would be horrible.
Here's the funny thing. I know you very well, and I know that you would never do such a thing, but you leaned over to me and suggested it. So in your mind, you're like, Jeff would do such a thing.
No, I was just messing with you. I knew you wouldn't do it either. I thought you would get a good laugh out of it. That's why I told you that. So
I did. I loved it. It was great. I'm trying to think if there were any other particular little things in there. You know, they did have it set up with a lot of toys. The Walt's kids spent a lot of time up there, and they shared the story of the lamp and how, it's always illuminated to represent that Walt's always in the park. And that's something that, that's a story that's been passed down over and over again. I feel like we've heard a bunch. And at Christmas time, it's replaced by a Christmas tree. And as you said, it's not the original lamp. There have been many lamps through the years, but we finally got to go up there, and I know that we both really wanted to do that for a long time. So it's pretty darn cool, I would say.
yeah, it was. One thing to mention in the bathroom is that like Walt's shower has like four
Four,
shower
four
heads.
shower heads. Okay, I
Yeah.
think that is a man ahead of his time, because I think I literally said something like "good man" when she said that. I was like so impressed by that. Walt Disney's shower had four shower heads. So whether that was all for his enjoyment or a party, I don't know. But in either case, good for Walt. And that just feels real. I don't know when that trend started, but I know, like, I watch a lot of HGTV, and I know that that's like really popular these days, and I'm a fan of it myself. And if people don't know this about me, shower time is my favorite time of day. If I could, I'd take like 5 showers a day. I love showers. I call it my morning coffee. The way that people can't wake up without a cup of coffee, I don't drink coffee. I get in the shower, and I love it.
You were so excited when she said that, and you like out loud, you said "good man," and
Yeah.
I could tell there was something that I learned new about you. Like, okay, showers are your jam.
Showers are totally my jam, 100%.
I think you would pay extra to like take a shower in that bathroom probably too, if that was like part of the tour.
Well, as you said, we could only poke our heads in there because a lot of that is original. They said the tiles were really fragile and such. Like, I'd be curious if the plumbing even works still. But yeah,
No water pressure, Jeff. You'd be miserable.
yeah, probably. Oh God, nothing like a good shower.
Yeah.
Nothing like a good shower. Anywho, people are learning so much about me during this episode here. So after that, we did go out to the apartment patio, and they gave us all a cookie and a drink. We both had water, and it was like a lemon sugar cookie sort of thing that I devoured and you did not. But it was kind of nice just to be able to have that like relaxing moment there.
I'm really picky about cookies, and I gladly gave it to you because you like went through yours incredibly quickly, and you really enjoyed it. I'm like, okay, this is all yours, Jeff. I don't need this. I don't need this cookie the size of a. It was like a size of a tile.
It was,
Like a big
it was bigger
tile.
than
It
a
was
tile.
huge.
It was giant. Yeah. And
Yeah.
as I saw it, I was like, oh, there's no way I can eat all that. And then like by the end of the tour, it was gone. I was like, well, apparently I can. But yeah, so we got to spend some time out there. One thing I want to mention that was a little bit shocking with this tour, I've never taken a tour where you weren't given a souvenir pin. Now, I am not a pins guy. I don't get super excited about pins, but the few pins that I do collect are pins that are given with tours and special events. Like those I will hold on to. I won't go buy a pin typically. I can't recall the last time I took a tour without a pin, and this really kind of surprised me.
Yeah, that was. I was disappointed. I was hoping for a pin, and I don't collect pins as well, but I collect tour pins or things like that. And I did a little research after, and I said, well, did they give a pin at one time? And the closest thing I found was they gave a button out.
Yeah.
And like you even pointed out to me, Jeff, it says Magic Key on it, which is kind
Yeah,
of interesting.
So I don't know if it was. Yeah, it's weird. It's not like only Magic Key people can take this tour.
Yeah.
So it was a Magic Key Walt's Main Street Story button. I don't know. It was very... And frankly, a button is nothing to me. Like a button I won't keep. A pin from a special event or tour I will. Yeah, they gave us a souvenir lanyard, and to be honest, I'm really into lanyards. Robert, you can see behind me right now, I've got a bunch hanging on the wall. I love lanyards, but like this wasn't a particularly good lanyard either. So the keepsakes, I will say, are not great with this tour. It's a bottled drink, a cookie, and a not great lanyard, in my opinion.
Yeah, maybe they're just bringing the tours back. There's a lot more tours coming. Maybe they're gonna enhance it, and because the pin they gave for the Walk in Walt's Footsteps tour, I thought that's a cool pin. Like I looked at it, I'm like, that's a really neat pin. I need to have that someday, and I don't collect pins. So yeah, maybe they'll hear some feedback and they'll start giving some sort of pin for that tour.
I am looking at the Walk in Walt's Footsteps in Walt's Disneyland Footsteps pin right now. It sits on my desk all the time. It opens up like a book, and inside is the opening day speech. So yeah, I agree. It is one of my, like most of my pins are just like stored. This is one, I think it might be my only Disney pin that is like on display always in my home. So I agree that pin is great. Hopefully, I like I said, I do feel like they're starting to roll the tours back out. So you may be right. Maybe in the not so distant future, stuff like that will come back. But this point of the tour, this is, as I said, we had the refreshments on the patio. This is where like the script stopped and our tour guide could kind of become just, a bit more human, for lack of a better term. And she was very lovely. We had nice conversation. And one of the things that was a little surprising was kind of just how honest she was about a couple things. And one of those things that I know is of particular interest to you is the Lily Bell car, which is part of one of the Disneyland trains.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember exactly what she said. I do know that over the years there's various ways you could get on the Lily Bell. It was a tour at one time. It was also open just to the public. You would, as soon as the park would open, you'd go right to Main Street Station, and they would give out a limited number of passes. And I'm trying to remember, what did she say? Because I was kind of curious. I haven't been on the Lily Bell for probably over 10 years now. I've only been on it once, actually. I was fortunate enough to go on it. And I think I was asking her, like, how do we get on the Lily Bell again? How do we see the Lily Bell or go on a train ride on the Lily Bell? So.
Yeah, it's been a long time since I've been on it too, but the thing that she said that I found really interesting and very just honest and forthcoming was that like currently there's a bit of a situation where they're trying to figure out whether Disney Guest Services, who runs these tours, will have control over it or whether or not Club 33 will. They're both kind of fighting to have control over the Lily Bell car on the Disneyland train.
Yeah.
So we don't know the answer as of yet, but at some point it's either going to be Guest Services having control, which means that more people will get to experience it on tours like we're talking about right now, or Club 33 will have the access, in which case it becomes very prestigious and far fewer people will get to experience it. So I'm rooting for Guest Services personally.
I was really curious how accurate that was, because I have heard in the past that Club 33 members can go on the Lily Bell, but that was many, many years ago. So I'm kind of wondering if that's like real information or if that's like, because there's always a lot of interesting information that surrounds that club, so.
Yeah, and you know what? I wouldn't be surprised if it's not real information because, not everything was 100% accurate, not all the information that we got on the tour. So, Robert, why don't you let the folks know, did your prediction come true? Remind the folks what your prediction was, and did it come true?
Well, I'm not really a betting man, but I think this was an easy bet, and, I definitely put $100 down on that. It did come true. I made this prediction, and our tour guide made a quote, and Jeff was very polite about it, I will say, and corrected our tour guide on the quote. I'll let Jeff take it away from here, and he could kind of say what he did. So.
Yeah, so first of all, I'm happy to hear you say I was polite because I really genuinely, in these moments, I don't want to be that know-it-all guy. I don't want to be that person. But there are things that I just feel very strong, like the Walt Disney World thing. Like, I know that kind of comes down to a little bit of opinion with me, but there are certain things, and quotes are one that it's just fact. And unfortunately, it happened in like the first moment of our tour. It was the first stop at Town Square where Walt made his opening day speech. To all who come to this happy place, welcome. Disneyland is your land. Here, age relives fond memories of the past, and here youth may savor the challenge and promise of the future. Disneyland is dedicated to the ideals, the dreams, and the hard facts that have created America, with the hope that it will be a source of joy and inspiration to all the world. So, she recites that speech, and two things here. Number one, I remember vividly in the Walk in Walt's Disneyland Footsteps tour that instead of the tour guide reciting it, they actually played Walt saying it through the headpiece. So we had none of that. We had no pre-recorded music or anything like that in the headpiece. That's something that I do miss. I actually really liked that as part of the tour in the past. So if anybody listening has any power with that, I suggest bringing it back. But here's the problem. When it got to the part where Disneyland is dedicated to the ideals, IDEALS, the dreams and the hard facts, she said the ideas, IDEAS. An easy mistake, I would say, but wrong, and I think significant. And when she said it, I was like, she's saying this so confidently that I think she thinks it's ideas, not ideals. So I'm like, I think she should know that. So there's like, because she clearly is saying it tour after tour after tour, so she's wrong every tour she's giving. And a possibly even bigger problem, which I hope is not the case, is that like the training manual has a typo or something, and therefore all the tour guides are being trained that way. So in either case, I'm like, this is a problem that should be brought to her attention. I didn't say anything in that moment. Like I said, it was the first stop. I didn't want to be that guy, but I knew that by the end of the tour, I had to say something. So this was the moment. We're sitting on the patio, we're talking, and I just said to her, I was like, hey, that part of the speech, I'm like, it goes, the Disneyland is dedicated to, and then what's the rest? And she goes, the ideas, the dreams, and the hard facts. And I'm like, no, the ideals, the dreams, and the hard facts. And she goes, no, the ideas. And I go, no, the ideals. She goes, no, it's the ideas. And she was like pushing. So I pull up Google and I show her the ideals, IDEALS. Now at this point, I ruined her day, right? Like I didn't know enough. I did it the way I knew how to do it without trying to be a jerk. I really was coming from a good place, but I think I ruined her day.
She looked clearly disappointed, and I would say displeased. I thought you were very polite about it, and you had good intentions. You want to. I mean, this is a very important tour. And Walt should be quoted properly in this tour, so I get where you're coming from, and also you kind of pulled her to the side, or kind of lowered your voice, and did it as politely, or in a way that wouldn't embarrass her, I would say. But yeah, she was very adamant about, like, no, I'm right, you're wrong. What I would have done if I was a tour guide, I would have just said, "Oh, thank you. Let me look into that." Even if I thought you were wrong, and you were not wrong, I would have just said, "Oh, thanks. I'll after this tour, I'll look into that, and I'll fix the mistake if it's that, right." So
She did eventually say something like that, but it wasn't until I showed her in Google. Like, she thought I was crazy. And listen, here's the thing. I do not expect these tour guides to know everything about everything Disney. Like, that's unreasonable, right? Like, I don't expect that. I don't even expect them to know as much as me a lot of the time. Like, that is not my expectation. But when something is so specifically part of your tour that is scripted and factual and quotable, I adamantly feel you need to know that and be right about it. I have zero regrets. Even if I did ruin her day, I'm not happy about that, but I think it was for the greater good. And some people listening might find that laughable, but like, I really do. I think that it's important. And if she's listening, I'm very sorry. Otherwise, I very much enjoyed your tour.
yeah, I totally agree. I think she did a fantastic job, and I would recommend the tour. And she clearly loved what she does.
Oh yeah, it was a dream job for her, she said. She said, like, and whether or not that was true, I don't know, but she like really was hammering, like, this was the dream. She'd been with the company for a long time. This was the dream job for her. So, like, I'm happy she's living her dream. Ideally, she would quote things correctly.
And I could see how that mistake is made often as well. Let's put it that way.
I've never heard it. Yes, it's an easy mistake to make, I think, but I've never heard it made before. But in any case, we'll move on from there. It happened. So I don't know what the wager was, but Robert, you win. Your prediction did indeed come true. You must have had a good laugh when you saw that happening right before your eyes.
Yeah, I got to win being part of this podcast today. Thanks, Jeff.
You're welcome. Excellent. Now, before we go, do you feel as though you learned a lot on this tour, or was it just kind of more enjoyable for you?
It was enjoyable. I would say that you know, the general public that would go on this tour that aren't crazy Disney fans like you and me. I guess there are going to be a lot of like really, nerdy Disney fans that are going to go on this as well. But I just wanted to see Walt's apartment. I wanted to see how he lived, how he entertained people, how he spent time with his family. And I wasn't actually going on the tour for like the facts of Main Street. I was really more interested in the apartment itself and more history about the apartment itself, but not necessarily Main Street itself.
So I completely agree with you. And that's why I think that the tour is actually named really poorly, because I honestly thought we were going to spend like 10, 15 minutes in the apartment and that was going to be it. But it's really half of the tour. And because of that, I feel like instead of Walt's Main Street story, which is a place, Main Street USA is a place that any Disneyland guest can visit for as long as they want. The selling point to me is Walt Disney's apartment. And I feel like that should be incorporated into the title of the tour much more so than Walt's Main Street. I feel like the selling point is the apartment. I feel like we spend enough time in there that it wouldn't be like disappointing if it was called like Walt's apartment tour. It can still be the same tour. It can start on Main Street and go there. I don't think people would be disappointed because we spent a lot of time in there. So I really think that the namesake, Walt's Main Street Story, is a very poor choice. And I think that it would do better if it, and they don't hide the fact that you're going to go to the apartment. It's mentioned in the description of the tour. I just think it would sell better, or it would, I don't know, it would be more straightforward.
Yeah, the tour, I've been wanting to do the tour, well, ever since I brought the tours back 5 months ago. I kept looking online and saying, oh, how quickly are these going to sell out? How do I need to plan this well ahead? And it does seem like a tour that doesn't sell out that often. I was, you could book it like almost the same day in some cases, it looks like, when I was looking online.
Well, I got to say, and there's a question I have for you. Do you feel it's worth $160? Because I think that that's a very steep price. Whenever you go, in my book, when you go above $1 a minute, so that would be $90 would be $1 a minute for this tour. And this is almost double that. That's a steep asking price, in my opinion. And, I would never suggest this if you just paid, full price to get into the park. This is like if you're a Magic Key holder or have free access for some reason. I think it's pretty steep price.
It is. I think if they added a nice pin and, rather than a cookie and a bottle of water, like some sort of lunchbox, which I think they did with the older tours.
They did that for Walk and Walt's Disneyland Footsteps, yeah.
Like a pre-prepared lunchbox or dessert box or something, like when you do some of the other events. It gets closer to that price range. But if you're a big Disney fan, Walt Disney fan like myself, I would say yes, it's worth the money to do once and see that, which is, I think, the kind of the target they're going for anyways. This isn't going to be your casual person who goes into the park that day that just wants to go and check out all the rides and get a corn dog, right? It's a very specific type of person that would go on this tour already.
Yeah, I agree with you, but at the same time, I think that the problem with that is what we just said, where neither of us learned a lot because we are those people that are Disney nerds, and those are the people that are willing to pay $160 for this. So if that's going to be the people you're targeting, I feel like there should be more in-depth history. Now, it was very surface level. I mean, if you've read a Disney book about Disneyland and Main Street USA, you knew everything that was said pretty much. So I don't know if you're charging a price that's going to really attract the Disney nerds. I think you need to amp up the teachings, if that makes sense.
Well, let's say if they added a pin and a lunchbox on the balcony. What's a price that you would feel comfortable with?
Honestly, I don't think this tour should be over 100. I think it should be $99 or less, personally. Especially if you've paid, $120 to get through the gate, $30 to park. Yeah, and honestly, I would say if you're listening to this and you're still interested, and listen, don't let me dissuade you. I'm so happy to have done this. Really, I think, like you said, one and done sort of thing. Like if you have that deep love and respect for Walt, go visit his apartment. I'm just saying it's not like a no-brainer. Oh my God, it's such a great price. Go do it. Like if this was a $50 tour, I'd tell everybody I know, go do this tour. This is like totally worth $50. But what I would say is if you're listening to this and you're interested and you're going with your family, I would say go do it. Don't feel the need to bring them along if they're not as interested in the history or Walt's, history and such. I would say go do it yourself or with one other member of the family or something. It's not worth paying $160 for, your 7-year-old kid or whomever might be with you that wouldn't appreciate it.
Oh yeah, definitely. Don't bring anyone along that you're just bringing along because they're in your family.
Well, yeah, and because they're in the park with you that day, like, don't be afraid to be like, yeah, go enjoy some rides. It's 90 minutes. It's not a huge chunk of the day, even if you're on your once-a-year family vacation. So, yeah, I would definitely suggest that. And, as I said before, lots of people are being trained for tours in that department. So I think that we're going to see more of that stuff start unrolling, which is great. Anything you want to add about the tour or anything we've talked about before we get going?
One thing I thought was interesting when the cast member photographer took photos of us, they specifically told us. Well, they told us a few things. One thing is like you could only take photos on Walt's side because during that period of time it was it's disrespectful to take photos on Lillian's side or the woman's side of the bed, right? That was like not something that was done back then. And then also they said that they hung like Walt's mother would be over his bed. So that's
a picture, not
a picture.
They did not hang his mother over his bed.
No. A photo of Walt's mother would be over his bed to designate that's his side, and then Lillian would have a photo of her mother on her side. I thought that was really touching to me. I thought that was really nice.
Yeah, the whole photo, we can only photographs Walt's side, I found really interesting. And to me, and I have no idea what the real reasoning is, and maybe that is the real reason, it felt like a BS explanation for something else. But I have no idea what that could be. But what a weird, that seems like a weird tradition to keep up.
Well, I mean, I accepted it as factual. I mean, while we were on the podcast, I looked online. It's like, did married couples sleep in separate beds? And they did up to kind of the mid to late 50s. They did do that.
In their homes?
That was common. Yes, in their homes. When was
the boom? When was the baby boom?
Yeah, really. It was after
when they started smushing beds together. They started. My gosh. That's crazy.
So that's not surprising, and they want to uphold the traditions and respect Walt and his family. So I it seemed like a legitimate answer to me.
Interesting. One other thing to note was when we're walking up to the apartment and sitting out on the patio, you can hear the Jungle Cruise clear as day. It's kind of amazing that it doesn't leak onto Main Street USA. Like, it is quite loud, and apparently it's something that Walt actually complained about a bit. And they're like, well, you did it. Like, it's your attraction, but it was really loud.
Yeah, and I heard that many times before where Walt couldn't sleep at night. And the apartment itself is really well sound insulated, but there was no air conditioning in the apartment. So they would have the windows open a lot of the time. And Walt would hear the Jungle Cruise all night. And my question was, like, they couldn't turn off the music loop or whatever that was playing back then, but I guess it wasn't easily done for some reason.
So funny. Too funny. In any case, Robert, this has been an absolute joy. Thank you once again for inviting me to come along and take the tour with you. And especially when you know that, there was a good chance I might cause some trouble. But I really had a great time, and I'm really happy to have finally gone to his apartment. That's been on my bucket list for a very long time. Thank you for being a patron and supporting Disney Coast to Coast in that way. That is very much appreciated.
Yeah, you were a great partner in crime to go see that. I couldn't think of anyone better to go see Walt's apartment with the first time. And also thank you for inviting me on the podcast to talk about it.
Thanks for tuning into this episode. Don't miss any future episodes by subscribing and following Disney with a Z, Coast to Coast on your favorite podcast app, where episodes are available 24/7. If you're a longtime listener of the show, thank you. And if you have the means, consider supporting the show over on Patreon. By joining Disney Coast to Coast's Patreon membership, you'll gain access to extra bonuses, including live stream Ask Me Anythings, unreleased episodes, and more bonus content. Take a look at all that's available by clicking the Patreon link in this episode's description, and thank you for considering. Until next time, anything you need can be found in this episode's description, from additional information and links discussed in this episode found in the show notes, to the DCTC hotline where you can leave a voicemail and be heard on a future episode, contact info to reach me, access to the show's official website, some free gifts from me to you, and so much more. So be sure to check out this episode's description. Other than that, folks, have a magical day. Bye!